Hey, welcome to the Metabolic Motivation Show. My name is Dan O'Byrne, former metabolically challenged business exec turned metabolism master. And each show, we're going to bring you an empowering expert or message to help you unlock your metabolism so you can lose fat, gain muscle, add energy, and look, feel, and perform your best. So thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let the show begin. We are live on the Metabolic Motivation Show. Very excited to have Dr. Carl Greer, who is a psychologist with a Jungian background, who's also done some shamanistic study work and has a fascinating book called Change Your Story, Change Your Life. Dr. Greer, thank you so much for making time for us.
Well, pleasure to be with you, Dan.
Same here, same here. Dr. Greer, let's talk about, if we could, briefly, could you tell us your backstory? I know you were a businessman, later you got into psychology, and then you've got quite a unique story. Looking back, how did that develop for you?
When I went to college, I was a metallurgical engineer. And then I went to graduate school, Columbia University in New York City. And I got my doctorate in finance and management. And I was on their faculty teaching in the Graduate School of Business for a while. Then I left New York to come to Chicago, where I was a businessman, entrepreneur for many years. But I'd always had an interest in fairy tale, shamanism, psychology. Didn't quite know how to manifest that. So maybe 30 years ago, I decided I would follow my interest in psychology. I became a clinical psychologist, then a Jungian analyst, and I continued to do business things. And then 15 years ago, I started to pursue my interest in shamanism pretty intensively. And that's been a very important spiritual discipline for me. And I've been practicing doing shamanic work and Jungian work and clinical psychology work, as well as doing business. And as I've gotten towards the end of my life, I want to do more philanthropically. So I've been doing that in the last years as well. So it's kind of evolved. And I think in some ways, Dan, it's been a way for me to relativize my life and to see myself as part of a larger picture. And even though it doesn't happen quickly, when I look back year to year, I think that's what's happened to me.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I hope I can look back on my life as with the same sense sometime in the future. Wow. So let's talk about your book. I know I was looking at some of the things on Amazon. You've got some wonderful reviews, and as many people probably know, the Amazon reviews are famous for the negativity. So I was pleasantly surprised to see all the positive reviews. Sometimes it seems negative people are more vocal than positive people. So congratulations on those great reviews there. How would you summarize your book, Change Your Story, Change Your Life?
As a Jungian and a shamanic practitioner, psychologist, I have had the privilege of listening to hundreds of stories over the years. And for some people, they seem to be stuck in their story. They just seem to be unable to move beyond the patterns that they find themselves in. So I was thinking about what might I do in terms of writing about that problem with some solutions. I've also known people who are very, very spiritual, but have had difficulty in bringing their spirituality into their everyday life. And lastly, I know people who want to give back in the world, but they just haven't found a real way to do that. So I thought I'd write a book to address those three audiences, some of which, are interacting, they're not always discrete.
Right. Right. Wow. It's fascinating. So maybe we could. Maybe I wonder if you might have a if you might be able to share a story, maybe a hypothetical example of one of the of someone who or a typical person who might be stuck in one of these patterns. Maybe they're seeing themselves as a victim, something like that, or whatever. You certainly would have could maybe share something that some of the audience might be able to relate to.
Well, some people may see a theme like I can't win for losing. Bad luck seems to follow me,
Okay.
or or if only I felt better and felt a little healthier, I could do this, that, and the other.
Yes.
Or my life circumstances, in order to survive and do what I need to do, I just have to work 70, 80 hours a week, and I'm just exhausted. Uh, or I'm always giving to other people and I don't get much in return, or et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So themes like that, and I found, Dan, that usually those themes are embedded in other themes as well. And so I suggest a first step for somebody is to really be honest with themselves as to what their story is as a starting point.
Okay.
And not only just in didactically, but emotionally, what's your story, and what are the right brain configurations of your story? How does it look, and how does it feel? And if you were to draw your story, what is it? And if you were to have a song about it, what would it be? And then I say, what about the chapters of your story? Your health, for example, and your psychology, and your relationships, and your job. All is discrete parts of your life that interact with each other. Your being of service in the world, the way you relate to a higher power. And then for many people, other chapters seem to be important. How do you relate to money? How do you relate to time? How do you relate to sexuality? How do you relate to authority? So whatever the emotional trigger points for you are, write about them. But what I found in that first thing to change your story, you have to know what the story is that you want to change. Many of us have trouble being honest with ourselves about what the story is, because you want to maybe tell the story that you'd like others to hear about you or
Yes.
see about you, rather than what the truth is. But once you get past all that, then you have a real sense of what is, and then you can ask yourself, what in all of these areas, if you had your druthers, would you like it to be? And there, people can do the same process each chapter. What would you like your health to be? What would you like your job to be? And you have to have some realism about what's possible and what's not. But people are able to do that exercise. And then you have that very interesting moment that all of us would meet at that time. Well, why isn't it the way you would like it to be?
Right.
And usually people are saying, well, when the kids get out of school, when they have a little bit more money, when this and that and so forth. So we have a lot of reasons why we're not moving towards our new story. And so I suggest ways to look at that to see if, in fact, there are reasons that one can overcome. But then I suggest that part of the reasons are there's part of us that we're unconscious of that doesn't want the new story for
Yes.
whatever reason. And so how do we really find out what those things are? And that's where I talk about these shamanic and these Jungian practices to get to what I call the transpersonal worlds, which psychologists could say the world of the unconscious, and Jung might say the world of the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, where the archetypes live. And it's various processes where I talk about going into those places and then interacting with what you find there to get information and energy to make the change from the old story to the new story. So that's kind of the framework of the book. And I suggest a lot of exercises to do that and a lot of practices to work with your unconscious or these bigger invisible realms to gain energy and information to change in all these chapters of your life.
Well, fascinating stuff. So if Jung would I think if I remember correctly, he would sometimes talk about inner figures. I guess is the inner figures would be I guess the archetypes or some of the symbolism. And for example, you mentioned earlier, and one that I hear in doing health and wellness coaching, I guess the most typical one everyone uses to maintain the status quo is, oh, well, I just don't have time. What would I'm sure that's one you've seen. How might you go about helping someone whose big block is that they have a number of things they want to do to improve their health, to improve their relationships, to improve their job, but they keep coming back to, well, I'm already so busy, I just don't have time.
I believe that everything's connected to everything else. So every thought we have, and every emotion we have, and every inner figure has information. And so I have processes which I teach and talk about in the book, where you can interact with each of those energies to find out more than you consciously would know what message it has for you. Now, for your example, let's say there is some part of you that is saying, I don't have the time. So Dan wants to exercise more or do whatever else, and part of him says, I don't have time. So I would say, embody that part, and I have a process where, as an example, you might blow the part of you that says, I don't have time, into a stone. You put it, away from you. You then ask it, well, can you explain to me, this part of me that feels it doesn't have time, how you think about it, or whatever question seems appropriate. Then you go over and you pick up that stone, take a breath, and become that energy. Now, it's possible to do that because, our minds have the ability to split and be many places at the same time. So part of you now is that part of you that says, I don't have time, who has been asked by Dan, the conscious Dan, can you tell me something about that? And then that part would speak. And it would say, look, Dan, for example, you've got to earn a living. You don't have the luxury right now of taking time, for your health. You need to put food on the table. You have to do this, or whatever it says. All right. Then you come back and become Dan again, having heard that. And so you say, look, I hear that, but if I'm going to earn my living and I'm going to be around long enough to take care of my wife and kids, I have to be healthy, or I'm not going to be able to do that. How would you respond to that? Then you become the part that says, I don't have enough time. And so by doing that, you're gaining more information that the Dan decision maker, the conscious part, is going to have to decide upon. So what are you going to do now with this additional information? And what this does, it explores in more depth these hidden resistances. And it's amazing. I mean, it's not snap your fingers and you're changed and you're going to be healthy forever after. But it's amazing how you get a new perspective about the issue. For example, I don't have enough time to do such and such. And it allows you, without being forced or making yourself feel bad, where somebody tells you, well, Dan, you really ought to take more time to be healthy. You really ought to do this. And all you do is feel a little bit ashamed, and you say, yeah, I'll do it, but you don't. It allows you to unleash things within yourself that allow you to make the choice to spend more time for your health, because you wrestled in a respectful way with that part of you that's telling you you don't have time.
Yeah, fascinating. And so, as you were mentioning earlier, sometimes these beliefs or these stories that we come up with are layered one upon themselves. In speaking with, I actually spoke in depth with my mother about this. I mentioned to you before. I think she has an educational side background, and so she was telling me a little bit that in her family the unspoken message was that you were supposed to be busy all the time, and that if you weren't busy, then this was sort of it was looked down upon. It was you weren't doing God's work. They were quite a religious family, and that was sort of the belief. And therefore, by being busy, she felt validated, even if she was running herself ragged. And it took her a long time to work through this. But that's something she was. I think she's now in her 70s, and she still battles with that. Waking up and feeling like, oh my God, I've got to work in the yard all day. She's retired and is very comfortable now, but and I need to go volunteer. Until the wee hours of the morning and that sort of thing.
Well, when you
yeah, it's a fun, interesting thing.
when you have that uh, belief system, for example, how do you uh, get below that to in a lifetime adopt another belief system is always the
Yes.
question. And one of the processes that I talk about is doing shamanic journeying. And
Okay.
one of the journeys is a lower world journey, which some people call a soul retrieval. And one of the phenomenon you encounter there would be a chamber of contracts, where you can look at what are the contracts you've made with life, uh, conscious and unconscious. So in your mother's case, it sounds like she's made a contract. I will be busy in order to, and you said, do God's work. So maybe her contract has been, I will be busy to gain favor with God. I
Okay.
will be busy to somehow ensure a good afterlife. So when you make a contract or a deal, there's always two parts. I'll do this in order to get that. I'll sell my house for this much money. So there's a quid and a pro. Quid
Yes.
pro quo. So for your mom to move beyond that, she'd first have to see that has been her contract, and then she'd have to say, how's that working for me? Is that really, am I okay with that? Is there another way now, 70 some years into my life, that I can gain favor with God separate from being busy? And how would I then free up the time that I've been busy? What would I do with it? So it raises all kinds of other questions, but the process at least shakes it up so she's able to ask those questions with the possibility, Dan, of change. Otherwise, we get in these patterns, which I would say, you're like that from 3 years old till you die.
Oh yeah, yeah, and which seems to happen to a lot of people. I think a lot of people are just not even willing to ask that question, much
Yes.
less much less try to peel the onion. I guess is to get down to these to
Well
the
put. Yeah. Yeah. It is peeling. It's layers upon layers upon layers, and then you start to see how, uh, as you are not feeling so hot, you may have some psychological issues. You may be a little bit depressed, and as you're not feeling so hot physically, you're a little depressed. Your relationship suffer. Your work suffers. Or let's say you're feeling a little depressed. That may make you feel unhealthy and be unhealthy, and that may impact your relationship. So all these chapters relate to each other, and so peeling the onions are good until you get to the core issues. That what are you going to do differently tomorrow or in the next minute than you have been before? Because that's the start of the change.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, really fascinating subject. Um, so that term, the shamanic journeying, the soul retrieval, that would be something that someone could gain from by reading, I guess, could learn about, but in your book.
Yes, I could. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So, what about one of the someone taking a step back from the book, but as far as people connected to some of the Jungian psychology, there's a rather famous guy that I used to have read a bit of, Joseph Campbell. Uh,
Yes.
Would is there any of Joseph? How do you see? Do you see any of Joseph Campbell's work influencing your work?
Uh, yes. Joseph Campbell talked about many things, but one of the things he's known for is talking about myths. Uh, and myths would be stories of cultures and peoples that have been present since time immemorial, that are fueled by archetypal energies. And archetypes are energies that influence how we think, act, and feel. And we as humans, in order to understand those, have often personified them. And so we might say, this is a man who's Zeus like. that has certain characteristics of how a man may be, or a woman who is Athena-like, and that would kind of capture certain characteristics of a woman who's Athena-like. So we all have the potential to be all these various things, but due to our life stories, our DNA, our upbringings, and our life experiences, certain things get triggered in us uh, in the presence of all these formative energies, which are archetypal. And the trick is to not be trapped unconsciously in an archetypal pattern. For example, a person who's very busy working all the time, that would a male archetype that captures that in mythology would be Hephaestus, the god of the forge. He's working all the time. He's kind of a little,
Right.
he's worried and he's working and he's pushing and he's working and and those are important people, but maybe they're not as fun to be around as somebody who's more Dionysian, who's dancing and drinking and
Yes.
making jokes. So the trick is to be aware of how you're being influenced, and then have enough relationship with these realms to have some of these energies loosen their grip on you, so you're more available for other kinds of energies.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. So, what would be some of the other you mentioned as far as the woman's archetype? I think Athenia, was it?
I'm sorry?
You had mentioned the female, one of the female archetypes, Athenia. I think here in Spain, especially in southern Spain, you see a version of that, which would be the Madonna. And even though most people aren't particularly religious as far as going to church, there's still a huge reverence for the Madonna figures, the Virgin Mary, and their processions, and it would be a figure that's more venerated today than any other religious figure. And it's quite fascinating. You can. I was in a taxi. I love to look at the icons that you can sometimes see in the taxis, and the taxi cab drivers oftentimes will, because they're in their car all day, they're a little bit more superstitious, perhaps, about the possibility of dying in the car, and they'll oftentimes have here in Spain would have some kind of image of a Virgin Mary, maybe a Christ figure. And I found last week I was in a taxi and the guy also had a figure of Buddha. I think he was covering all of his bases.
Sure. Yes.
Wow. So let me change gears here a little bit, and if going back to the symbolism, how would we relate when we talk about symbolism? Are we talking about? You mentioned also perhaps someone might gain from journaling and maybe even drawing out some of the images in their own story. Would that also relate to how would that relate to the symbolism?
I think the process involves, it's like a dolphin. It's kind of above the water and then in the water. So you're immersed in things and then you're reflecting. When you're immersed, let's say you're immersed in the unconscious realm, say in a dream or a journey, you may encounter things. For example, you may encounter a gold bell, or you may encounter an animal figure. And they could be an inner figure, but they could also be a symbol that has multiple meanings to you. It's not a sign, but it's got multiple meanings that, as I described with you, how you can dialogue with that part of you that doesn't have time to exercise. You can also dialogue with the symbol and ask it, if it came up in a dream, what message do you have for me? What do you want from me? And then you can ask it, gold bell, I think maybe you are telling me such and such, am I right? And then you ask it, what can I do for you? And I say that because in all these realms, the shamanic idea, Dan, is right relationship. In Quechua, there's a word called Aini, which means right relationship, right thoughts, right love, right actions, reciprocity, mutuality, the right thing at the right time in the right amount. So it's these balancing things. And so when you're dealing with these other realms, the attitude that I think is appropriate is to do it with mutual respect, not just asking, hey, tell me this, help me to do that. It's the difference between some Western people's prayers where we're asking God for this, this, and this, whereas some of the Native American peoples, when they pray, are saying, Great Spirit, God, we thank you for life. We thank you for food. We thank you for the sky. So it's prayers of gratitude as opposed to, can you do these seven things for me? And so it's this right relationship when working with a symbol. And that's how I would suggest, in answer to your question, one could work with a symbol.
Yeah, so gratitude is a fundamentally powerful force that I think you're right. I think we oftentimes overlook that. It's one of the it's interesting. I'm sort of into the world of what's now termed biohacking, which is looking for any practice that will help one to live better, to perform better, to be happier. And this may be, some of these things are traditional in some traditional psychological strategies, and others are taken from more Eastern or alternative philosophies. And one of the simplest things that's going around in this area is just it's actually nothing new. It's just having a practice every morning of listing three things that you feel gratitude for, and it's one of the simplest things that I have. I would say one of the smallest hinges that swings big doors that I've ever experienced.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing how in psychology, oftentimes they're trying to do research as to what works and what doesn't. And so we have, the issue of what are the appropriate independent variables that are going to affect the dependent variables, and can you control for other things going on? And what they often find is kind of the non-specific factors. It's the relationship between the two people. It's just the facial expressions they have that are really hard to measure. And similarly, instead of do these 6 sets of push-ups within 22 minutes and do the jumping jacks and do this and that as your exercise routine, you say, just express gratitude. It's kind of a how do you measure that? And why in the world does it seem to work? But it does. And they're just things like that, when we can discover those for our lives, can be transforming.
Yeah, no question, no question. I've gotten a strategy I use with with people who have the time, the I don't have time thing, and that is you look for those dead times, or that you can do two things at once, like being in the shower. It's a mindless thing. We all pretty much know how to shower. We know how to load the dishwasher. Or something like that, and try to, or we're driving to work or wherever we might go, and we're in traffic. So I try to
Yes.
to hook these little habits into my clients. These times that are normally wasted. And say, okay, when you're in traffic, just think about one thing that you're grateful for that day. Could be the smallest thing in the world. And it's been amazingly, people have reported back to me that it's been really beneficial for their just general outlook on life.
Absolutely. It's interesting you're talking about the spaces. I'm working on another book is about changing the story of your health.
Oh,
and,
wonderful.
and so I'm looking at all these things. And one of the things is a lot of people say they don't have time, just like you're saying. We always have these little spaces. And I was, for example, waiting for an elevator.
Yeah.
You can just in those seconds, breathe in. Just breathe in and maybe 8 or 9 counts. Hold it and then exhale 8 or 9 counts. and maybe you have a chance to do that a couple of times. It's amazing how that changes something. Or try to balance on one foot while you're doing it. Or do a little stretch to one side. When you're in traffic, you can do the same, kind of breathing. And the other thing which I talk about is very healing and connection to these other realms is being in nature or doing ritual and ceremony to honor the magnitude of the life that we have the privilege of living. But people think, well, to do a ritual and ceremony, you have to have hours to do it and prepare. Sometimes it's just, you can do it in a minute and a half. It's just your intention. It's just looking at the waves or the sun or being with the tree to honor something that's bigger than ourselves and feel that we're part of a larger picture can be a very healing ritual. And it's a little mini ceremony that we have the ability, as you're saying, in these spaces during our day to create.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love the what you mentioned when you mentioned the tree thing. That also brings to mind, so many of the trees are going to outlive us by many centuries.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, this leads me to another area that I find fascinating, which is which we're really into now is some of these is positive psychology. Is anything else you could add as far as simple strategies that you have seen things that are easy to implement and yet can give a very positive result.
Well, of course, the things you implement are dependent in some ways on the particular story of the person who wants to implement them and what they want to change to. So that has to be taken into account. And all the stuff in my book or my practice, Dan, is to have a person be a little more free from the consequences of their past and have better understanding so they're not caught up in the patterns of their past so that in the present they have more freedom of action. And similarly, to have them hook up to a different future than perhaps they're now on so that more desirable future for them in spirit will help influence the current decisions. So the work is to be free of the past, tied into a better future, so that each of those moment-to-moment decisions in the present are more soulful and getting you in this lifetime to the destiny that you want. Now, that's individualistic, and so it's harder to come up with a lot of 7 rules to do it, because it starts with what is your current story, what is the one you would like, why aren't you there, and as you get free of some of the energies that are keeping you from there, then people can kind of figure out the answer to your question themselves. But I'm really convinced that the answer requires change at the margin. It's not like these big, grandiose, big changes. It's just like you say, I'm going to manage the time in the car a little differently. At dinner, maybe a little differently. At the elevator, a little differently.
Yeah, I find small changes allow us to get leverage, to get momentum, and and it's something that I've learned to ask. I think my experience is with maybe 10% of people can make probably less, probably 5 to 10% can actually go and go from being, for example, sedentary, eating a standard American diet. Which is processed foods and not good, and can become active and start to eat healthily and do it all at once. I think it's extremely hard. Yet it's sort of what's been proposed to people, and I think it's one of the reasons why if we really look around, we could. It occurs to me oftentimes that we hold our football coaches or our basketball coaches to such a high standard. If their team is losing, they'll lose their job during the season sometimes. Whereas we hold our health and fitness and healthcare recommendations. If we look at those recommendations over the last 25 to 30 years, and then we look at the results as far as obesity, as far as chronic diseases of all types. It's just obviously there's some huge mismatches or problems going on with the implementation of it. So it's good to see that I think your book is really really relevant to all this. And you mentioned your new book, which is geared more toward. Can you tell us a little bit about your new book project?
It's to help people who want to make the changes in their health, to get information from these realms to help them make those changes, and to keep them on the new way. I mean, when I thought about health, Dan, and you may have other thoughts about it, one of the big independent variables is what you eat. And the old rule, mostly plants, not too much, not processed. That's not a bad rule.
No, not at all.
And then exercise. Everybody would say you should exercise, and some weight training, aerobic, some balancing, some stretching, and so forth. And then people would say with typical diets, particularly as you get older, you need some supplements, and here's what those are. And then people would say you need some stress reduction, and here's some practices for that. So and the inputs on those four categories, they change. But so first thing for health is to get as much of the facts as you can, and then find some way to do what you should do, but also see that your health is part of a larger picture of wholeness. And I'm suggesting there's ways you can relate to these other worlds that can promote health, help the immune system. There's ways you can spend time in nature that can make you healthier. You can work with your dreams in ways to make you healthier. You can journey to make yourself healthier, because if you believe that everything's connected to everything else, you're bringing new information into your system, just as you bring information by the chemicals in your food, by being exposed biomagnetically and electromagnetically to various phenomena in your life, to various slots and so forth. So I'm talking about those things in conjunction with things that a person can do to improve their health.
Wow. Look. So, can you tell us a target date we might look forward to the book?
I would hope in the next year or so. I've got other things that I have in my life that I'm trying to be a good steward of.
Sure.
I've got lots of kids, lots of grandkids, and charity things, and I still see some clients, and I do some workshops. So I'm trying to balance my life and not get trapped of being too busy, because I grew up in that generation with your mom that idle hands are good.
Oh, right. In fact, I just remembered another one. One of the other ones was idleness is the devil's workshop.
No, it's absolutely.
I think I've got some of that myself. I'm
Sure, yeah, and kind of related, but again, that generation, you clean your plate. You're the Clean Plate Club member. So you eat everything on your plate, and when you're 8, 10 and you're active, that's one thing. When you're 75 and you're cleaning your plate, you don't burn it off so much.
Yeah, it's quite different. This is one of the. I think being in Southern Europe, I get over to Italy a few times a year. It's quite easy for us here in Spain, and there's a lot of similarity. And there's you don't see that whole. You don't see that story about you must it's almost like in the States or in Anglo-Saxon culture, it's almost like a badge of honor to say that I'm so busy, I'm so stressed. I've got too much to do, and therefore give me a medal. Whereas in Southern Europe, it's more the opposite. It's more like, what's wrong with you? You know, don't you know you've got to enjoy life? You know, sometimes it's too much, and sometimes it goes the pendulum goes too far. But it certainly is there's much more of a carpe diem. Live for the moment, and which has been good for for this formerly workaholic, still workaholic Americans. So.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting. We are products of all those cultural stories, and we have on the one hand people saying take time to smell the roses. The other hand saying, well, those people in Europe, they take all those vacations, they don't have any productivity, and we have to bail them out economically because they're slothful. So we have all these competing messages, which I'm obviously overstating that, but some people would say that. And so how do you balance all these realms of our life? Our economic, as I said, that story, and our health, and our relationships, and our psychology. Well, it's all a function of how you spend your time, in part.
Yeah, no question. I found it to be very effective. Just simply to have a schedule and actually have a stopping. For me, the more important thing is to have a stopping hour, so that I know that at 9 p.m. the computer is turned off. And I'm probably not really working up until 9 p.m., but I'm not going to go back to it too much unless it's something really urgent. And then my wife gives me a free pass once in a while.
Yeah. Right. Well, and to adhere to those self-imposed rules can be very useful.
Yeah, no question. Well, Dr. Greer, I want to be respectful of your time, and this has been a wonderful conversation. And I'm sure we could go on and on and on. Is there anything? Let me just close with one more question, and then I'll ask you also to tell us how, for people listening, how they can find you online or about your work. But before we get to that, if you could journey back in time, say 25 years to 1990, what would the Carl Greer of today? What lesson, if you could send, let's say a message in a bottle, keep it simple, a message in a bottle to send back either for yourself or something that you would have used to help, you've learned to help others, what would be your message in the bottle?
I would say take time to very honestly reflect on your life. And if there are areas of your life you'd like to change, be open to all the conscious and unconscious energies that might help you change and that also may keep you from changing, and try to work respectfully with both of those sets of energies. I would say that's what I've learned. And I by no means have got that figured out, Dan, but I do more of that today than I did in 1990.
Okay, brilliant stuff. So Dr. Greer, for people out there who might want to find out more about your work, what would be the best place for them to look you up?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. My website is carlgreer.com. I have an email sign up capability for people who want to receive my blogs. My book, Change Your Story, Change Your Life, is available on Amazon. My publisher, who's been great to work with, European, in fact, Findhorn.
Findhorn, okay.
Yep. And so those are some things, ways where people could find out more about me.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Greer, we have a future. It's a future dream to create a conference, a yearly conference in Europe for people who are sort of progressive, health-oriented people, and I would certainly put you on our wish list for speakers. in the future. We don't have dates yet, but that just starting that that journey on that project. So we would love to invite you to that down the road, and we'll love to stay in touch with you.
Well, I appreciate the chance to visit with you today, Dan.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, before you go, 3 quick things. First, if you like this video, please share it. Second, if you'd like to empower yourself on a regular basis, check out all the free information we have over at metabolicmotivation.com. And thirdly, if you'd like to fast track your own progress so you can look better, feel better, and perform better, we are now offering free 15-minute phone consults to answer your biggest question. And all you have to do is go to metabolicmotivation.com and just click on the Contact Us button. So that's all for now. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.